Life is short, and I have made a lot of mistakes, but everything in life happens for a reason. Amy Winehouse. Some loves write songs. Others, they write destinies. For Amy Winehouse, a voice that clawed its way from the smoky depths of a bygone era, a voice that could channel a century of soul, Dinah Washington's defiance, Sarah Vaughan's velvet, Billie Holiday's heartbreak, yet remained so fiercely, undeniably her own. One love did both. It ignited her brightest fire, the incandescent, world-stopping brilliance of Back to Black, an album that didn't just chronicle heartbreak. It bled truth, beauty, and raw, unvarnished agony onto vinyl. But that same fire, fanned by a love as wild, as consuming, as utterly untamed as her talent, threatened to burn everything to the ground. This isn't just the story of an icon, instantly recognizable by her towering beehive and the defiant slash of Cleopatra eyeliner. No, this is the story of a woman, a fiercely original North London girl, with a chasm in her soul, a love that became both her most potent muse and her most devastating undoing, and a masterpiece born from that beautiful, terrible collision. What happens when the deepest well of your artistic inspiration is also the clearest, most treacherous map to your self-destruction? How does a talent so immense, so pure, become so inextricably, tragically entangled with such profound, relentless pain? Before the beehive became a global symbol, before Rehab was an inescapable, tragically ironic anthem echoing from every radio, every club, there was Amy Jade Winehouse, born September 14, 1983, into a Jewish family in North London. Music wasn't just in her home, it was in her blood, her bones. Her father, Mitch, a taxi driver with a voice of his own, would serenade her with Frank Sinatra, instilling an early love for the classics, for the impeccable phrasing, and the raw emotional depth of the great crooners. Her paternal grandmother, Cynthia, a singer herself, a woman who once dated the legendary jazz saxophonist Ronnie Scott, was a profound influence, a kindred spirit who saw the flickering flame of Amy's unique talent and nurtured it, suggesting she attend the Susie Earnshaw Theatre School on Saturdays. Many of her maternal uncles were professional jazz musicians, their world of complex rhythms and soulful improvisations further immersing her in its intoxicating embrace. This rich musical tapestry, woven with the threads of jazz, soul, and the larger-than-life personalities her father adored, shaped her from a young age, nurturing a voice that seemed to carry ancient sorrows and a defiant, almost dangerous joy. Her parents separated when she was 9, a crack in the foundation, an event that undoubtedly left its mark, perhaps planting early seeds of insecurity, a yearning for a stability that always seemed just out of reach. Even as a child, a defiant, fiercely independent streak was unmistakable. She attended the Sylvia Young Theatre School, though tales of her expulsion at 14 for a nose ring and not applying herself, while disputed by the school's founder, added to her burgeoning rebellious mythology. Sylvia Young herself denied expelling Amy, stating she simply changed schools at 15. Yet, an English teacher there remembered Amy as a gifted writer, predicting she might become a novelist or journalist, a testament to the depth already brewing beneath the surface. She later attended the prestigious Brighty School in Croydon, honing her craft, though she'd drop out at 16, impatient perhaps to live the life she would later sing about. By 14, she had her own guitar, a cheap, battered instrument that became an extension of her voice, and she was already writing music, channeling her sharp observations and turbulent emotions into lyrics that were startlingly mature. Her 2003 debut album, Frank, released when she was just 19, was a jolt to the system. It announced a singular, undeniable talent. The title itself, a defiant nod to her hero Sinatra, and, more significantly, to the candid, often brutally honest nature of her lyrics. It was a confident, jazz-inflected statement, praised by critics for its languid, wide-open neo-soul grooves, and her commendably feisty lyrics. Songs like Stronger Than Me, which snagged her an Ivor Novello Award for Best Contemporary Song musically and lyrically, showcased a young woman utterly unafraid to speak her mind, her husky, expressive contralto voice already carrying a weight and wisdom far beyond her years. Yet, Amy, the eternal purist, would later express dissatisfaction with Frank, feeling the promotion and marketing didn't align with her artistic vision. She famously told The Observer, "I've never heard the album from start to finish. I don't have it in my house. Everything was a shambles." This early discontent, this fierce artistic integrity, this burning desire for control would define both her greatest triumphs and her deepest, most public struggles. But it was in 2005 that the earth truly shifted beneath her. A fault line opened, setting in motion the chain of events that would lead to her global superstardom and, with a terrible, tragic symmetry, her undoing. His name was Blake Fielder Civil. He wasn't just a boyfriend. He became an obsession, a mirror reflecting her own intensity, her own capacity for chaos and all-consuming passion. Their world was the gritty, intoxicating romance of Camden bars, jukeboxes spinning 60s soul, the Shangri-Las, the Ronettes, a whirlwind of devotion that was as exhilarating as it was volatile. She once said, "When I fell in love with Blake, there was 60s music around us a lot." That sound, those raw, unfiltered emotions of love, betrayal, and loss from a bygone era, seeped into her artistic DNA, becoming the bedrock for what was to come. She was already known for her profound sensitivity, an artist who felt things so deeply it was both her extraordinary gift and her terrible curse. This relationship would amplify that tenfold, pushing her to creative heights she'd never imagined, and dragging her to personal lows from which she might never recover. During this period, around 2005, her drinking and drug use reportedly escalated. Her family believed that the death of her grandmother Cynthia in mid-2006, that crucial stabilizing influence, that anchor in her often stormy world, further contributed to her vulnerability, leaving her adrift in a sea of burgeoning addiction. But the intensity that drew them together, that magnetic, almost dangerous pull, also foreshadowed the fractures. This was no gentle love story. It was a firestorm, fueled by passion, and increasingly by shared, destructive habits. And when Blake temporarily left her in 2006, returning to an ex-girlfriend, the devastation wasn't just personal, it was seismic. It didn't just break her heart, it cracked Amy open, leaving her with a grief, a guilt, a searing sense of abandonment so profound, it demanded an outlet, a voice. She would later state that Back to Black was almost entirely about this period, a raw, unflinching exploration of grief, guilt, and heartache. The stakes were brutally clear. Her heart was shattered. What she couldn't have known then was that from these shards, these broken pieces of her soul, she would build an enduring, iconic monument. Heartbreak can silence, it can crush, or it can make you sing like never before, with a voice dredged from the very depths of your despair. For Amy, it was unequivocally the latter. The searing pain of Blake's departure became the ink, the blood on the tracks. She didn't just write songs about a breakup. she excavated the raw, bleeding core of her experience, transforming her agony into art so potent, so visceral, it felt like you were living it with her. Mark Ronson, who would co-produce the album alongside her earlier collaborator, Salaam Remi, recalled their first meeting. She played him the 60s girl groups she adored, her voice already thick with the blues of her own fresh wound. That raw, unfiltered emotion, that almost unbearable honesty, was the genesis of Back to Black. The title track itself, Back to Black, was a direct hit, a defiant, wounded cry from the abyss of her despair. He left no time to regret, kept his dick wet, with his same old safe bet. Me and my head high, and my tears dry. Get on without my guy. The words were brutal, unflinching, a woman scorned but somehow, almost impossibly, standing tall, even if her knees were buckling under the weight of it all. Ronson, captivated by her stories, her passion, her raw, undeniable talent, crafted the music for it overnight, a stark, cinematic, string-drenched landscape, perfectly mirroring her sorrow. The term Back to Black itself, a chilling premonition, interpreted by many as a return to drinking and depression, following the split, a descent into a darkness from which she might never fully emerge. Then there was Rehab, a song born from a real conversation, a moment of characteristic, almost breathtaking defiance against her then management, against the worried pleas of those around her, even against her father, Mitch, who at one point thought she was fine despite her escalating drinking. They tried to make me go to rehab. I said no, no, no. It was astonishingly catchy, impossibly bold, a lyrical middle finger to the growing concerns surrounding her. At the time, it felt like an assertion of control, of her unshakable autonomy. Heard in retrospect, it sounds like a tragic, deeply ironic prophecy, a public declaration of a private battle she was already desperately losing. The line, "And if my daddy thinks I'm fine," became particularly poignant, a window into the complex family dynamics, the blurred lines, and perhaps the enabling that sometimes surrounded her, a loving but ultimately flawed support system. But the album was far more than just two iconic singles. You Know I'm No Good laid bare her vulnerabilities, her painful self-awareness of her own destructive patterns, confessing to infidelity, to feeling helpless against her impulses. Love is a Losing Game, which would also earn her another Ivor Novello Award for its lyrical and musical brilliance, was a devastatingly beautiful, concise summation of romantic despair, a song so perfectly crafted, it felt like a standard from another era. Tears Dry on Their Own, with its clever, uplifting sample of Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell's Ain't No Mountain High Enough, transformed a classic expression of devotion into a song about picking oneself up after a fall, even if the tears still stung, even if the ground still felt unsteady beneath her feet. Some Unholy War took the language of global conflict and twisted it into a declaration of loyalty within her own turbulent relationship, a battle she seemed determined to fight, no matter the cost. Each track was a chapter in her own intensely personal drama, set to a soundtrack that was both timeless and startlingly new. The collaboration with Ronson and Remi, and the authentic, gritty sound of Sharon Jones's band, the Dap Kings, perfectly captured the girl group swagger and soulful depth she was aiming for, blending it seamlessly with contemporary R&B and neo-soul. The stakes were no longer just her heart, but her very soul, poured raw and unfiltered into these recordings. She was transforming her pain into art, but the lines between the artist and the anguish were beginning to blur, to dissolve, to become dangerously, fatally intertwined. When Back to Black dropped in late 2006 in the UK and later in the US, it wasn't just an album, it was a cultural detonation. The world, it seemed, was starved for Amy's raw honesty, her refusal to varnish her experiences, her willingness to lay bare her darkest corners. The album soared up charts worldwide, eventually selling over 16 million copies, making it one of the best-selling albums of the 21st century. Critics raved, praising her emotive singing style, her unparalleled songwriting, and the flawless production. Suddenly, Amy Winehouse was a global phenomenon. The culmination came at the 2008 Grammy Awards. 5 wins in a single night. Best New Artist, Record of the Year and Song of the Year for Rehab. Best Pop Vocal Album. She became the first British female to achieve such a feat. She was, undeniably, the voice of a generation. Her towering beehive and dramatic eyeliner, an instant, unforgettable signature, a defiant uniform. But here's the devastating paradox, the cruel, tragic twist in her meteoric rise. The songs born from her deepest, most agonizing pain were now the soundtrack to her overwhelming, suffocating fame. The world celebrated the art, but the artist herself was unraveling at an alarming, terrifying pace. The relationship with Blake Fielder Civil resumed, and they married in Miami in May 2007. But their reunion didn't bring peace. It often amplified the chaos, their turbulent, drug-fueled life together becoming relentless tabloid fodder, a grotesque public spectacle. The very muse for her masterpiece was now a central figure in her public, painful descent. The media scrutiny was merciless, a harsh, unforgiving spotlight on her most vulnerable moments. Paparazzi hounded her every move, their flashes like machine gun fire, capturing every stumble, every tear, every public display of distress. As one commentator chillingly noted, it was always hunting season, and Amy Winehouse was always the game. Her struggles with alcohol, which had been present for years, escalated dramatically. And then came the harder drugs. Reports of heroin, crack cocaine, and ketamine use became public spectacles. In August 2007, she suffered an overdose from a toxic combination of heroin, ecstasy, cocaine, ketamine, and alcohol, a near-fatal cry for help. Performances, once electrifying displays of raw, untamed talent, became erratic, sometimes shambolic, leading to booing, walkouts, and tour cancellations. The defiant girl who sang "No, No, No" to Rehab was now visibly, painfully in its grip, a prisoner of her own addictions, her own fame. Her friend Tyler James later noted the impossibility of her situation, saying she had to go through rehab, a period of extreme vulnerability, in front of people, under the glare of a world that seemed to feast on her pain. She was changing. The vibrant, sharp-witted, fiercely intelligent artist was still there, but increasingly obscured by the tragic caricature of the troubled star, a role the media seemed all too eager for her to play. She battled not only addiction, but also profound mental health issues, including diagnosed bipolar disorder, for which she reportedly refused medication, and a long-standing, insidious struggle with bulimia, an eating disorder that often went overlooked amidst her more publicized addictions, a silent killer gnawing away at her from within. She once told an interviewer, "I do drink a lot. I think it's symptomatic of my depression. I'm manic depressive. I'm not an alcoholic," which sounds like an alcoholic in denial. This statement itself captured the terrifying complexity of her struggles, her own difficulty in confronting them head-on, the denial that is so often the cruelest symptom of addiction. She reportedly told her bodyguard, Andrew Morris, while watching her own electrifying performances, that she would give it back just to walk down the street with no hassle. The fame she'd achieved, the fame fueled by the pain of her great love, was now an inescapable, suffocating cage. The stakes had become impossibly, tragically high. Her prodigious talent, her fragile sanity, her personal freedom, her very life. Many around her, caught in the whirlwind of her success, seemed to enable her behavior, or at least failed to intervene effectively, as the machinery of her fame, the industry that profited from her, kept churning, kept demanding more. There were periods of sobriety from hard drugs in her final years, fleeting moments of hope, glimmers where friends and family saw the Amy they knew and loved, the witty, vibrant woman beneath the turmoil, emerge from the shadows. Her father, Mitch, described one such period before her death as the happiest she has been for years, and she had reportedly abstained from alcohol for 3 weeks, leading up to her final fatal relapse. She was, by some accounts, fighting hard, trying to claw her way back from the brink. But alcohol, the substance that had been a constant, insidious companion for so long, remained a tenacious, relentless demon. The terrible, heartbreaking irony of Amy Winehouse's life is that the very sensitivity that made her such a profound and compelling artist, that allowed her to connect with the deepest human emotions, also made her exquisitely, dangerously vulnerable. She felt everything too deeply: the love, the loss, the relentless criticism, the crushing weight of global expectation. Her innate defiance, once a charming and integral part of her artistic persona, her fierce refusal to be anything but herself, became a tragic barrier to accepting the sustained, intensive help she so desperately needed. She had been to rehab multiple times, but often left prematurely, unable or unwilling to fully surrender to the process, to confront the demons that held her captive. On July 23, 2011, the music for Amy stopped. She was found dead in her Camden Square home, aged just 27. Another brilliant, tragic addition to that infamous, heartbreaking club, a label that itself risks glorifying the very struggles that consumed her, that stole her from us. The cause of death was accidental alcohol poisoning. Her blood alcohol level was more than 5 times the legal driving limit, a massive, lethal dose that her body, especially after a period of abstinence, simply couldn't withstand. A death by misadventure, the coroner called it, an unintended fatal consequence of a relapse into heavy drinking, a final tragic misstep on a tightrope she had walked for too long. Her doctor had seen her the night before, describing her as tipsy, but calm and coherent, even looking forward to the future, a future she would never see. Her last words to her mother, Janice, the day before, were a simple, poignant, "I love you, Mummy." The change was complete, but not in the way anyone who loved her or her music had ever hoped. The vibrant, once-in-a-generation force of nature had been extinguished. The girl who poured her broken heart and bruised soul into Back to Black had, in a devastatingly literal way, been consumed by the very fire that forged her masterpiece. Amy Winehouse's story is often and understandably framed as a cautionary tale, a stark, brutal warning about the destructive perils of fame, addiction, and untreated mental illness. And it is, undeniably, all of those things. But to reduce her to only that, to see her only as a victim, is to miss the greater, more resonant truth of her legacy. It's also a testament to the ferocious, untamed power of a singular talent, an artist who, for a breathtaking, unforgettable moment, translated her deepest, most personal pain into something universally understood, something achingly beautiful and profoundly enduring. Back to Black remains her monument. An album that didn't just capture a moment, it defined one. It threw open the doors for a new wave of artists: Adele, Duffy, Florence Welch, Lady Gaga, Sam Smith, empowering them to be raw, to be real, to bleed their own complex truths into their music, to embrace their imperfections, to show their scars. She changed the landscape, particularly for female artists, proving that vulnerability could be a superpower, that honesty, however brutal, however uncomfortable, could be breathtakingly beautiful. The love that inspired her greatest work was a maelstrom, and the fame that followed, a destructive hurricane. Amy stood in the eye of that storm, singing her heart out, her soul bare, until she simply couldn't anymore. What we learn from her isn't just about the darkness that can engulf even the brightest stars, but about the blinding, incandescent light of a talent that, however briefly, burned so incredibly, so unforgettably bright. Her voice, her honesty, her defiance, her soul, they echo still, a timeless, heartbreaking reminder that even in the deepest sorrow, there can be breathtaking art. And that perhaps is the most universal, the most human truth of all. Her song may have ended far too soon, but the music, her music, will never, ever die.